Imagine a country with no rivers. A land so dry that 98% of it is just sand, where summer temperatures regularly climb past 120 degrees Fahrenheit. This is Saudi Arabia, one of only a handful of nations on Earth without a single natural river flowing within its borders. No rivers, no lakes. On a map of the world's climate, it appears as a place where life simply shouldn't be able to thrive. And yet, in the heart of this vast and unforgiving desert, they have accomplished the seemingly impossible. They haven't just found water, they've built their own rivers. These aren't rivers carved by nature over millennia, but monumental feats of human engineering. Massive streams of fresh water are drawn straight from the ocean, then travel across hundreds of miles of scorching desert. They are pumped over mountain ranges that tower more than 10,000 feet high. The network of pipes that makes this possible is so incredibly long it could wrap around our planet 35 times. It's a system involving thousands of pumping stations that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, delivering billions of gallons of life-giving water to sustain 35 million people. How did a nation born into such extreme aridity create this lifeline? The story is a gripping tale of impending crisis, brilliant innovation, and an epic, relentless battle against the elements. It's a story that doesn't just challenge the desert, it redefines what is possible for humanity in the face of environmental adversity. To truly appreciate the scale of this achievement, we must first understand the severity of the challenge. Saudi Arabia isn't just dry, it's geographically isolated from natural water sources. Its landscape is primarily a high plateau, which acts like a giant wall, effectively blocking any moisture-laden clouds from the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea from ever reaching the interior. The result is a climate that ranks among the most harsh and unforgiving on Earth. It's a place where survival has always been a constant, daily battle against the elements. The numbers tell a sobering story. According to international standards, each person in Saudi Arabia has access to a critically low amount of renewable water each year, about 68 to 90 cubic meters. That is 5 times less than the absolute water scarcity threshold set by the United Nations. To put that into a clearer perspective, the average American uses up to 9,000 cubic meters annually. The difference isn't just significant, it's staggering. It highlights a gap between mere survival and modern living that is almost unimaginable. We all know the fundamental rule of survival. A human being can live for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. In Saudi Arabia, water has never been just another resource. It has always been, quite literally, a matter of life and death. So how did they manage to survive and even build a modern society for so long? Their original solution was hidden deep beneath the sand. For decades, the kingdom's answer was to tap into fossil water. These are ancient, non-replenishing aquifers, vast underground reservoirs that were filled with water during a much wetter climatic period, thousands of years ago. Think of them as immense, buried lakes that do not refill. They are a finite resource, much like petroleum. Starting in the 1980s, the country embarked on a massive drilling campaign, creating thousands of deep wells that pumped trillions of gallons of this ancient water to the surface. The scale of this operation was staggering. At its peak in 1992, annual water consumption from these sources reached 7.5 trillion gallons, enough to fill more than 27,000 Empire State Buildings. For a time, it seemed as if the problem of water scarcity had been solved forever. The desert was blooming and the future looked secure. But there was a devastating catch, wasn't there? This fossil water, much like oil from a depleting well, cannot be replaced. It's a one-time gift from a different age, and they were using it up at an alarming rate. In just 25 years, the water level in the crucial Al Asa aquifer dropped by nearly 500 feet. By 2012, a shocking 80% of the country's total groundwater reserves had been pumped out and consumed. The kingdom was suddenly facing a catastrophic emergency. The well was literally running dry. The escalating water crisis forced the nation to launch a drastic and immediate survival plan. The goal was simple in theory, but ambitious in practice: slash water consumption across the board. The target was to reduce personal water use to just 40 gallons per person, per day. To put that number in a relatable context, that is only about 1/17 of what the average American uses daily. It meant a fundamental shift in how an entire population thought about and used water. This required a comprehensive nationwide shift in behavior and infrastructure. Cities installed advanced smart water meters to track usage in real time and imposed heavy financial fines for any form of waste, from a persistently leaky faucet to watering a lawn during the heat of the day. In agriculture, by far the biggest water user, consuming over 80% of the supply, drastic changes were implemented. Thirsty crops like wheat, which were heavily subsidized, were scaled back dramatically. Farmers were encouraged and assisted in adopting water-saving technologies like drip irrigation and high-tech soil moisture sensors, making every single drop of water as precious as gold. The results of this concerted nationwide effort were genuinely impressive. In 2015, agriculture alone used about 6.5 trillion gallons of water. But by 2020, through strict measures and technological adoption, nationwide consumption had dropped to 4 trillion gallons, representing a nearly 40% reduction in just a few years. It was a monumental achievement in conservation. However, it's important to note that each Saudi citizen still uses about 321 gallons per day, which is roughly the same as a person in France. This shows just how deeply embedded water use is in any modern society and how difficult it is to curtail. But here's the crucial point that became clear. Saving water only bought them some valuable time. It was a defensive action. It couldn't possibly quench the exploding long-term thirst of a rapidly growing population and the agricultural needs that support it. It was akin to trying to save gasoline by driving less, without also developing a new sustainable energy source. They needed an offensive strategy. They needed a massive, sustainable, and nearly limitless supply of new water, and the only source of that magnitude around them was the vast ocean that bordered their land. But there was an obvious and formidable problem, wasn't there? Seawater makes up about 97% of the world's water, but it's salty, mineral-rich, and completely undrinkable. The solution, they realized, wasn't just to find more water, but to create it from scratch. They had to learn how to turn the boundless sea itself into fresh, potable water on an industrial scale. The process of removing salt from seawater is called desalination, and Saudi Arabia's journey with it began with small-scale experiments back in the 1970s. But it wasn't until the early 21st century that tens of billions of dollars in strategic investment turned this ambitious scientific plan into a powerful, life-sustaining reality. The growth of the desalination industry in Saudi Arabia has been nothing short of explosive. By 2024, the country operates 41 massive, state-of-the-art desalination plants along its coasts on the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Together, these industrial behemoths produce around 3 billion gallons of fresh water every single day. To grasp the scale of that output, consider this. It constitutes 22% of the entire world's total production of desalinated water. One country now produces nearly a quarter of the planet's man-made fresh water from the sea. Let's put that in an even clearer perspective. The entire desalination system of the United States, all of its plants combined, produces less than 1/5 of Saudi Arabia's daily output, even though the US has a much longer coastline. Through sheer will and investment, the kingdom has become the world's undisputed leader in the science and practice of creating fresh water from the sea. The crown jewel of this extensive network is the Ras Al Khair megaplant on the coast of the Persian Gulf. It is a behemoth of modern engineering, often described as a city built for a single purpose. This single plant alone produces a staggering 264 million gallons of fresh water daily, enough to supply nearly 2 million American households. But its engineering marvel doesn't stop there. It also generates 2,400 megawatts of electricity, an output equivalent to 2 medium-sized nuclear power reactors. This power is used to run the plant itself and to supply nearby industrial zones. Its pipelines and advanced water treatment systems stretch for hundreds of miles, operating continuously to supply both drinking water and power. It is a testament to what focused human ingenuity can achieve. Building these massive coastal plants was one thing. Making the desalination process itself energy efficient and cost-effective was another, trickier challenge. How do you remove salt from water on a billion-gallon scale without using a prohibitive amount of electricity and contributing heavily to carbon emissions, especially when demand keeps rising every year? The race for efficiency in the desalination industry centers on two core technological approaches. The first is thermal distillation, which includes specific methods like multi-stage flash, MSF, and multi-effect distillation, MED. The fundamental principle sounds simple, much like a natural process. You apply heat to seawater until it turns to steam, leaving the salt behind, and then you cool the steam back down into pure fresh water. In large industrial plants, this happens in a series of huge sealed steel chambers. The seawater is heated and then passed through these chambers, where the pressure is progressively lowered. This causes the water to flash evaporate at lower and lower temperatures, which saves some energy. The resulting vapor is then condensed on cool surfaces into liquid fresh water. The big advantage of this thermal method is its durability. These robust plants can last 20 to 25 years, and its ability to handle all kinds of seawater, even water with high salinity or pollution, without suffering from major problems like scale buildup. Furthermore, the leftover heat and steam are often cleverly reused to spin turbines, generating electricity and offsetting some of the massive energy cost of the process. And that energy cost was the method's primary drawback. At one point, these thermal desalination plants were consuming nearly 9% of the nation's entire electricity output, a huge drain on the country's resources. This huge energy appetite led to the rise and dominance of the second, more efficient technology, reverse osmosis. This is a younger but rapidly advancing technology, ironically inspired by the natural biology of our own cells. Reverse osmosis doesn't use heat, it uses brute force in the form of immense pressure. Pre-treated seawater is forced at extremely high pressure through banks of incredibly fine, semi-permeable polymer membranes. These filters are just a few millionths of an inch thick, with pores so incredibly tiny that salt molecules, bacteria, and even viruses can't pass through. What emerges on the other side is nearly perfectly pure, fresh water. The most impressive part of reverse osmosis is its dramatic energy efficiency. Thanks to advanced engineering devices called pressure exchangers which recover and reuse up to 96% of the energy from the high-pressure waste stream, modern RO plants are incredibly frugal with power. It now takes only about 2.8 kilowatt-hours of energy to produce 264 gallons of water. To give you a sense of what that means, it's about the same amount of electricity it takes to light 10 standard LED light bulbs for 1 hour. The difference in energy consumption compared to the older thermal methods is staggering. This staggering gap in operational costs led Saudi Arabia to make a pivotal strategic decision to switch its entire future desalination system toward reverse osmosis. Today, the majority of new plants being built use this technology, and older thermal plants are being phased out or converted. This means that every glass of water poured in a home in the capital city of Riyadh, hundreds of miles from the coast, is intimately connected to these advanced filters, the electricity required to power them, and an ever-increasing number of solar panels that run day and night to make the process more sustainable. But this incredible engineering miracle comes with a significant environmental question. Have you ever paused to wonder what happens to all the salt and minerals that are removed from the seawater? They don't just magically vanish. The desalination process, for all its benefits, produces a challenging byproduct. For every liter of pure fresh water produced, approximately 1.5 liters of concentrated salt water, known as brine, is left over. For many years, the standard practice was to simply pump this dense, super salty, and often warmer wastewater directly back into the sea. The environmental problem is that this brine, when discharged carelessly, can sink to the seafloor and create a deadly, hyper-salty layer that suffocates marine life. In parts of the Red Sea, where many desalination plants are located, scientists have already observed the consequences. Dead zones where coral reefs, the rainforests of the sea, have bleached and died, and where fish populations have dramatically declined or disappeared. Experts rightly call this the hidden environmental cost of desalination, a serious side effect that demands a smart and sustainable solution. So what is being done about it? Saudi Arabia, aware of this impact, is now actively testing and implementing smarter ways to handle brine. They are deploying advanced systems like deep-sea multiport diffusers, which act like showerheads on the ocean floor, dispersing the brine over a wider area and ensuring it mixes with ocean water more rapidly and thoroughly to minimize the local impact. Even more excitingly, they are pioneering a new field called brine mining. This involves processing the brine to extract valuable minerals like table salt, magnesium, potassium, bromine, and even trace amounts of rare metals like lithium. It's a brilliant and forward-thinking attempt to turn a costly environmental problem into a valuable economic resource, effectively working towards a zero liquid discharge model and closing the waste loop in the desalination process. Creating vast quantities of fresh water on the coast was only half the battle. The next challenge was, in many ways, even more monumental from an engineering perspective: distribution. How do you physically move billions of gallons of this heavy liquid across hundreds of miles of a vast, empty desert and over massive mountain ranges that reach 10,000 feet high? The original, older water distribution network primarily served the major population centers like the capital Riyadh and the holy city of Mecca, leaving many remote communities and even some growing cities with an unstable and unreliable water supply. The pressure to solve this is immense and growing. The urban population is exploding. Riyadh, for example, has ballooned from 5.2 million people in 2010 to over 7.8 million by 2024, and it is projected to hit 9 million by 2035. The old limited pipeline system simply couldn't handle this scale of growth and demand. Saudi Arabia's solution to this logistical nightmare was an engineering masterstroke. They chose to build an entirely enclosed, piped river instead of relying on open-air canals, which were also considered. This was a brilliantly smart and strategic move. Why pipes? For several critical reasons. Pipes require less extensive digging and earth-moving than canals, making them faster to build across long distances. Most importantly, they drastically reduce water loss from evaporation under the blistering 122°F desert sun, losses that could have claimed billions of gallons. Furthermore, enclosed pipes keep the water clean and safe from blowing sand, dust, and other contaminants, ensuring water quality is maintained over journeys of hundreds of miles. The system they built is so colossal that it holds a Guinness World Record for the largest water pipeline network on Earth. The main trunk pipeline system alone stretches for 8,820 miles across desert plains and over massive mountain ranges. If you add up all the primary lines and the smaller distribution branches that feed individual cities and villages, the total length reaches an almost incomprehensible 880,000 miles. That is long enough to wrap around the equator of our planet 35 times. It is an artificial circulatory system for an entire nation. The process is a marvel of modern logistics. Water from the coastal desalination plants is first pre-treated and purified, increasingly by reverse osmosis. It is then stored in massive stadium-sized holding tanks near the coast. From there, it begins its epic journey inland, flowing through huge trunk pipes. Think of them as the main channels of this artificial river. These giant pipes, often several feet in diameter, then branch into thousands of smaller secondary and tertiary lines, much like capillaries, serving each city, town, and village along the route. The storage capacity within the system is equally mind-boggling. Riyadh's water storage tanks alone can hold nearly 1.3 billion gallons, a world record for roofed capacity. The entire integrated system has the capacity to deliver up to 5 billion gallons of clean water daily, about as much as the entire state of Texas uses on a peak summer day. But building this pipeline river was a Herculean task. Laying hundreds of miles of heavy-duty pipeline across flat, sandy terrain is difficult enough. But hauling, welding, and installing these same pipes over barren, rocky, and steep mountain ranges presented a whole new level of challenge. Each segment of pipe represented a massive logistical puzzle, requiring thousands of workers, giant drills for tunneling, and a series of powerful, high-pressure pumping stations running non-stop to push the water thousands of feet uphill against gravity. They weren't just laying pipe, they were literally building a river that flows uphill. But what happens when even this massive land-based network reaches its logistical or energy limits? You have to think outside the box, or in this case, offshore. In 2022, the Saudi government's Saline Water Conversion Corporation (SWCC), together with private international partners, launched a pioneering new idea: a fleet of floating desalination plants. These are not barges carrying water. They are entire, self-contained desalination factories built onto giant ocean-going barges which are then anchored just off the Red Sea coast. Think about the strategic agility and flexibility this model offers. Unlike massive fixed concrete plants on land that can take 5 to 7 years to permit and build, a floating desalination station can be constructed in a shipyard and then towed to any coastal city in need. It can be connected to the onshore network relatively quickly, and within a short time it is producing millions of gallons of water. If that city's water crisis is alleviated, or if another region has a more urgent need, the floating station simply lifts its anchor and is towed to the new location. The fleet can also be expanded modularly by simply adding more barge units to increase capacity as needed. This is a strategic game-changer for water security. Each of these floating stations is substantial, capable of producing up to 13.2 million gallons of fresh water daily, enough to supply almost 150,000 American households, an impressive output comparable to the water needs of a mid-sized U.S. city. Furthermore, these barges are specifically designed from the outset to integrate with renewable energy sources, such as floating solar panel arrays or future offshore wind turbines, helping Saudi Arabia reduce the carbon footprint of desalination and move closer to its ambitious net zero emissions targets. It's like having a mobile, flexible, and green water factory that can sail to wherever it is needed most along the coast, perfectly supplementing the massive fixed land-based pipeline network. What is perhaps most remarkable about this entire endeavor is that its significance extends far beyond Saudi Arabia's own borders. The blueprint they have developed, the combination of advanced, energy-efficient desalination technology and vast, resilient pipeline networks, could serve as a vital lifeline for an increasingly thirsty world. Just imagine the possibilities. Arid and drought-stricken regions around the globe could adapt this model. parts of North Africa, like the Sahel region, South America's Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth, or even perpetually drought-stricken states like California and Arizona, could use this integrated approach. They could turn their adjacent ocean water into a reliable, drought-proof source of fresh water for their megacities and agricultural heartlands, pumping it hundreds of miles inland. If coastal nations work together, these technologies could evolve into a global water security network, bringing clean water and stability to hundreds of millions of people who currently lack reliable access. So what do you think after hearing this story? Could this be a viable and necessary answer to growing water shortages in other parts of the world? Might we one day see artificial rivers like the Nile or the Colorado, engineered by human hands, bringing life to other arid regions? Will the technology become cheap and efficient enough to be deployed on every continent? The story of Saudi Arabia's quest for water is more than just an engineering marvel. It is a powerful lesson in human ingenuity, resilience, and foresight. It demonstrates that even the most daunting environmental challenges can be met with vision, determination, and technological innovation. They didn't just accept their arid fate, they used every tool at their disposal to engineer a new one, creating a legacy of water security from a position of extreme scarcity. What are your thoughts on this incredible undertaking? Do you think a solution like this could be implemented where you live, or in other water-stressed regions you've heard about? Let us know your opinions and questions in the comments below. We're excited to hear what you think and to discuss it together. And if you want to see more fascinating stories about how people are solving the world's biggest challenges, from water scarcity to energy, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next incredible story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.